Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3553. Sorry, 52. Today's date is August 24, 2025. It has been almost like morning at 8:35 a.m. All right, let's jump into the question. All right, okay. Now, question is, when I am short on money, I usually think. Okay, okay. What exactly is this question? Well, this question is kind of like only associate with that key when you didn't really have enough money, then how do you feel? How do you feel something like that? Um, have you ever feel like that? Ki you have little less amount of money? Yes, I feel that ki sometimes I didn't really have that much amount of money so that I would survive. So how do you feel when you don't really have that much amount of money? Um, I feel that okay, let me explain. Okay, yeah. So when I was doing a job, I was like my salary was not that much. Okay, yeah, probably 14,000 rupees. Yeah, usually I get 14,000, like sometimes 13,000, things like that. Okay, um, so when I get this salary, I it's not really good salary, but that is okay. Okay, yeah, I was kind of like living alone, paying the rent and food and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. Till the end of the month, I might have very less amount of money. Okay, yeah, and sometimes salary credited little bit late. Okay, yeah, like not the first of time, like not the first day of month. Sometime it kind of like a credit or on fifth day or sixth day or like after the 10th day. Okay, yeah, so it's kind of like a bit really annoying because I have little short on money and the salary is actually credited after like a little bit after time. It takes time to credit, so it's little bit annoying and stuff like that. So how do you manage or how do you feel when you have short amount of money? Well, probably is this thing na ki um I think that na ki I was not actually thinking anything. I was kind of like somebody went to the survival mode. Okay, what's a survival mode? Okay, let me tell you one thing. So survival mode means like that ki you are kind of like a spending uh, on money on such a thing which is very essential. Okay, yeah. So usually when I have little less amount of money, I would kind of like somebody spend that money so wisely that it kind of like somebody spend on very essential thing. And what is that essential thing? Food and rent. Okay, yeah. And probably I kind of like somebody give the rent. The rest of the important thing is that ki food and yeah, transportation. Yeah, because I usually go from office to room, so usually I need a kind of like a fuel. So transportation. So transportation and fuel are really most essential important factor. Rent is also really essential, but I think that okay, till the end of the day I will not gonna wait for rent. Okay, I usually give the rent at the first week of the month. Okay, yeah, but food and transportation, these are kind of like a things are very essential thing. And when I have little less amount of money, I went to survival mode. Okay, yeah. So what is survival mode? A survival mode means like that spending money on such a thing which is far more essential. Okay, yeah. So when the survival mode on, like let's just imagine that yeah, I have maybe like 1,500 rupees in my bank account. Okay, yeah. Now I have to be survive for at least 2 weeks because of that. Ki, I think that ki, with the 2 weeks I didn't really get any kind of salary. So how do I supposed to survive with this 1,500 rupees? Okay, yeah. First of all is that ki rent I already done it. Okay, yeah. Now regarding about food, I kind of like simply make sure that ki like food is also kind of like simply covered. Like basically I do have kind of like a sort of tiffin and dabba. Okay, yeah. And and basically I get dabba from from mess. Okay, yeah. Morning and as also night. Okay, yeah, twice. And this is also really covered too. But because of kind of like something my room and the where I live is kind of like something far away from the city, so usually there is no kind of like a dabba wala over there. Okay, yeah. So usually I eat from Bhojnalaya. Bhojnalaya is a kind of like a some place where you could went there and you could eat. Okay, with a kind of like a some thali means like that. Usually when I go to that Bhojnalaya, it kind of like a cost 70 rupees thali. Okay, yeah. So I have to give 70 rupees and they have to give me the thali with kind of like some all the roti, chapati and chawal and dal and everything. All right. So, but if I have kind of like a short amount of money, then what should I supposed to do? What is exactly is this thing? Okay, yeah. So my strategy was that transportation is really essential. So I need a kind of like a sorry, make sure that whatever the money that I have, I should supposed to be used for transportation. Okay, rent is already covered. Okay, yeah. So transportation. So transportation means like that. Let's just imagine fuel. Okay, so if I kind of like a put the fuel for almost like a 200 rupees or 300 rupees, then making sure that I will not race my bike that much. Okay, what's the race? Like basically you just kind of like heard that vroom 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 vroom, that is called race. Okay, yeah. So when this thing happened, it's not actually kind of like a sort of engine running it very rapidly, but without moving the bicycle, without moving the car, without moving the bike. Okay, is actually happened because of that there is no gear is actually alerted. Okay, yeah. So when there is no gear, it's just kind of like a simply engine running with free flow. Okay, yeah. But when you do vroom vroom, it kind of like consume the fuel, which is kind of like a simply not good. Okay, so I'm gonna make sure that I will not do that much race. Okay, yeah. And also is this thing making sure that I would not do any kind of like some acceleration or maybe little bit acceleration or whatever the acceleration that I do, I just kind of like do it and kind of like only make it neutral or make it put the clutch or things like that, so that I would survive or I would kind of like somebody save the fuel. Another thing is that if there is a way, there is a one way is a highway, another way is a kind of like something like a shortcut way and things like that. So I prefer highway, because when you drive your vehicle from highway in a straight line, you are actually consume very less amount of fuel as compared to when you went to kind of like a simply like a turn and things and that narrow road and things like that. In that particular time you are kind of like applying brakes and clutch and kind of like a things and acceleration. So in this particular time you are kind of like consume more fuel than highway. Okay, yeah. So I prefer highway because highway is a kind of like a straight line. You just have to go accelerate with kind of like a very less amount of fuel will gonna consume. But if you went to kind of like a zigzag road, then it will gonna consume so much amount of fuel. So I kind of like a choose highway, so that I would kind of like a simply consume, I would kind of like consume very less amount of fuel, which is kind of like a simply very essential for me because I am on survival mode. All right. So this is all kind of like is happening with the fuel. Okay, I'm trying to make sure that I would kind of like sustain these 300 rupees of fuel for at least like a maybe 2-3 days. Okay, yeah. So that I would kind of like survive, right? Now let's talk about the food. Okay, yeah. Wait. Okay, now let's talk about the food. Okay, so regarding about food, what I kind of like a something have procedure, what is the protocol regarding about the survival mode. Okay, yeah. So regarding about food, I have very less amount of money. Okay, yeah. So if I'm kind of like consider that I have almost like a 1,500 rupees of fuel, 1,500 rupees in my bank account. Okay, yeah. I have to go to the office every single day, so that means transportation is really essential. That means I have to be pay fuel. I have to be kind of like a pay for fuel for transportation and things like that. Okay, yeah. Because of I kind of like driving my bike, and I understand that usually I kind of like simply drive my bike at least like 70 kilometer per liter. Okay, yeah. So if I'm kind of like something think that ki 70 kilometer per liter, and usually 1 liter cost in India is probably at that time it was almost like a 83 rupees somewhat. Okay, yeah. So if I'm kind of like somebody put the fuel for at least like a 200 rupees or 300 rupees, so I would probably get 2.5 liter or things like that. Okay, yeah. But usually my office is kind of like a little bit far away from my room and things like that. So probably it's the distance from my room to office is almost like a 50 kilometer. Okay, yeah. So if I'm kind of like consume that 50 into 100, like ups and down, so 100 kilometer. So 100 kilometer, that means like if I put kind of like something 300 rupees of fuel, it kind of like survive me for at least like a 2 and 2.5 a day. Okay, yeah. So I have to be figure it out that ki within a 3 day, like let's just kind of like a stretch little bit further, let's just like within a 3 day I would kind of like consume 300 rupees of fuel. Okay, yeah. So basically within a week I might need a kind of like a 600 rupees of fuel. Okay, yeah. I have to be survive for 2 weeks, so that means 600 plus 600, that means 1200. Okay, so that means 1200 rupees are actually spent on fuel. Okay, I have almost like a 1500 rupees, so probably I have like a remaining 300 rupees remaining. Okay, so with the 300 rupees I have to be survive. Okay, yeah. Good thing is that ki rent is already covered, and usually at that time I have mess. Okay, two different mess, one is office mess, another mess is a kind of like a at the home. Okay, so usually is this thing when I go to the office have kind of like something mess, so I have to be pay money over there. Okay, yeah, but this is also already covered, so it's not really matter. The problem is that ki I don't really have kind of like a food for kind of like a dinner. Okay, because like after I kind of like came from home, there is a dinner. So if I kind of like somebody spend money on food, and I have only 300 rupees, 70 rupees thali, so probably 70, I can't really afford that much, like basically 70 7 7 so 7 21 7 28, that means like if I kind of like ate kind of like a simply thali every single day, so I would survive only 4 days, but I have to be survive at least like a 14 days because I don't really have that much amount of money. So what I do, what is actually my game plan? Okay, so my game plan was that ki usually is this thing I do multiple times, and it's not really that harsh that you think is that kind of like assembly I don't really have spend money on food. It's a kind of like assembly very common, and basically it's not, it's this is kind of like some skills, something like skills is not because of you have money, it's because of that key, like how do you kind of like survive and how do you things like that. Okay, yeah. Because it's a really essential trick. Okay, so what I do, okay, so first of all is that key I kind of like a simply buy the bread. Okay, yeah. Bread, like a bread, it's bread is a kind of like a really good thing. Okay, so buy the bread with kind of like a something jam or things like that. Okay, so if you buy kind of like a something like a 10 rupees or 20 rupees of bread, okay, jam I'm not kind of like considering as a kind of like a jam from kind of like a something pickle jar and things like that. No, I'm kind of like a something the 2 rupees of jam. Okay, Kisan jam, 2 rupees of kind of like something packet that I get. Okay, yeah. So usually apply that 2 rupees of kitchen jam of to this packet, like just a small packet kind of like a things. Okay, you just apply there and you can eat it. Okay, yeah. So if you make that kind of like a bread at least like a 3 slice. Okay, yeah, like a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, that means I'm gonna eat 6 bread. Okay, yeah. So which will kind of like a fill up your kind of like a everything, like it kind of like a feels you something that ki you are full. Okay, so that is a really good thing. Another thing is that I always carry chuda. Okay, yeah. If you don't know what is really chuda, so like a chuda is a kind of like a Indian cuisine, by the way. Okay, yeah. So whenever I go home, I kind of like a something make my mother that ki make me chuda. Okay, so this chuda is kind of like something somewhat very essential too, because when I have little less amount of money, when I'm survival mode, so that chuda is kind of like a something very somewhat something really essential. So sometimes I ate bread with a jam, sometimes I ate bread with a chuda. Okay, yeah. And it gives you kind of like a something fulfill experience, like you just feel like that ki, you already ate it. So what I do is that ki I skip the dinner. Okay, I skip the dinner. Instead of that I would kind of like a eat the kind of like a bread with a jam or kind of like a chuda and things like that, and which is somewhat something really okay. Okay, yeah. Another thing is that this is what I do, and I usually kind of like a something is this thing that I just okay, yeah, it doesn't really feel that much, because tomorrow I have to go to the office, and then I would do kind of like a something lunch, so everything would be okay. And obviously is this thing, in the office they have kind of like a something that snacks which is kind of like offering for free, like coffee and things like that. They have kind of like sometimes biscuits too. Okay, so I could eat that thing and it would be kind of like something okay. Also I have chuda na, so probably like regarding about this thing, it's kind of like something okay for me. Okay, yeah. But if you wanted to do even more further, like if you kind of like something eat that bread and things like that, but you are still really hungry and you wanted to do this thing, so another thing is that I haven't really used this kind of like technique, but first of all, I drink a lot of water. Okay, drink too much amount of water, because water is kind of like giving you a kind of like some fake assumption regarding about you already ate too much, so that is really good thing. Okay, yeah. And even after you still really hungry, just instead of kind of like somebody thinking about food and stuff like that, divert your mindset somewhere else, like a watch movie or watch kind of like a things that kind of like you entertain, like that you completely forgot that you are kind of like somebody want to eat or things like that. So this is kind of like a somebody game plan that you have to do when you are kind of like a little less short amount of money. Okay, yeah. So this is what I do. Okay, yeah. Obviously is this thing that my survival mode is a kind of like a something pretty much different than your survival mode, but probably is this thing, it's somewhat really essential, so that we have life and we have kind of like some certain goals and things like that. We can't kind of like quit that having a short amount of money. Also another thing, why don't like you are actually thinking that why am I not asking money from somewhere else? Well, probably is this thing na I don't really think that it's a big issue. Okay, yeah. Like the only problem that I have is that fuel and food. That's it, nah. So probably I could eat the bread and jam and that's it. That's fine. It's not really that. And fuel is already covered. So it's okay. Why would I supposed to be asked? Like if it is something very essential, like I really don't really have money, and then in that particular situation, I'm gonna ask help. I'm gonna ask financial help from somebody that give me at least like a 1,000 rupees and stuff like that, because I don't really have that much amount of money. So in that particular situation, yeah. But when I am on survival mode, when I'm kind of like I have little less amount of money, I went to the survival mode and I'm kind of like simply spend on money on very essential thing. Okay, yeah. Also let me tell you one thing, the scenario is a kind of like a very much different, that if you are kind of like a running a business and things like that, and if you are short on money, so what do you do? Like let's just imagine that if I'm kind of like a running a business, and probably is this thing that I didn't really have that much amount of money to kind of like survive my business for a little bit longer period of time. So what would I supposed to do? Okay, yeah. So basically this thing regarding about business, my strategy would be really different. Okay, what's the different means like that since the beginning of the kind of like assembly, like basically this thing, the survival mode shouldn't supposed to be happen when you have low on cash or low on money or things like that. Okay, because let me tell you one thing, when you are kind of like somebody alone, you could kind of like somebody survive with a little less amount of money, that is okay. But when you are kind of like a running an organization or kind of like a may kind of like a doing a things with the multiple people, and in that particular situation you are kind of like a running low on money, then probably it would be kind of like a very catastrophic, because every person doesn't really think that way, doesn't really want like, and not everyone can kind of like somebody kind of like do the things like that, survival and things like that. No, nothing like at all. So what do you do, like a when, like what is actually your game plan, that when you have kind of like running a business and you don't really have money, or you have like a low on money, low on cash or things like that, so what do you do? Okay, so in that particular situation, I have kind of like a somebody game plan, which is not from the kind of like a somebody when the survival mode happened. No, it start from the beginning, start from the kind of like established from a business, because I understand that I am not come from the kind of like a wealthy family, I don't really have any money backup or things like that. Yes, my ambition is really big and things like that, but like a money is matter. Okay, and when you have little less amount of money, you can understand the possibilities of kind of like how much worse will gonna happen, and I don't want to that worst thing will gonna happen. So probably is this thing na I would kind of like simply spend money on my business according to the kind of like simply the money that I earn. Okay, yeah. What I'm trying to tell you. Okay, yeah. So basically, this thing, my game plan was that ki right now, like from, let's just say my situation. Okay, I'm kind of like a putting this situation that it might gonna happen with me. Okay, so my is this thing that ki I wanted to establish my application. Okay, yeah. But is this thing that ki I cannot establish my application by my own. Okay, I need a kind of like a couple of people. Okay, yeah. But is this thing that ki how do I supposed to give them salary, how do I supposed to give them things or that, like if something, yeah. So I need some sort of amount of money, and obviously I would not gonna earn money from my application at the beginning. Okay, as also I will not gonna found any kind of like some investor who could kind of like invest money on my application, nothing really at all. So what I do is that ki I have to be kind of like a sorry, find another source, and this is what kind of like another source that I'm doing. I'm kind of like doing a YouTube. Okay, yeah. Right now I'm doing kind of like a some content creation on YouTube platform. Okay, and I might gonna earn some sort of amount of money from YouTube every single month. Okay, yeah. Obviously it's a kind of like ups and downs and things like that. Maybe there is no constant cash flow, but I might think that if I'm being really consistent and things like that, I might gonna kind of like something really good. And I believe in my content creation process, and I think I'm really creative person too. So I'm not really sure how much, but kind of like a somewhat something amount of money that I could earn from the YouTube. Okay, not really too much, but something. Okay, which is kind of like a simply had enough so that I would kind of like a simply execute my app. But I'm kind of like a making sure that if I don't really have money or things like that, how would I supposed to be hire such a people who could kind of like make the application, things like that. So first of all is that I have to be make this application by myself. Okay, like basically 90% of the work should supposed to be done by myself. Because of that there is no one I can't afford someone who can kind of like something to do work for me. So probably everything that I have to do at the beginning, I have to be doing by myself. Okay, regarding about building the sites and things and that. Obviously is this thing, I can't do everything, and I need a kind of like a person who could kind of like do that thing. Okay, so in that particular situation I am gonna hire that particular person. Also I would kind of like consider that if I'm hiring that particular person, how do I supposed to give them salary. Okay, yeah. And if I'm kind of like giving them salary of almost like a 30,000 rupees, so 30 into 12 like a Bharatrik 24, that means 2,40,000 rupees. Okay, so that means 2,40,000 rupees do I have, like can I able to kind of like a something do I have 2,40,000 rupees so that I would kind of like hire that particular person or not. Okay, yeah. uh, if I have that 2,40,000 rupees, so I would kind of like save that amount of money for that particular person, so that if I hire that particular person, then I would kind of like simply give that money, not like everything at the beginning, no, but kind of like simply 30,000 rupees every single month, so that that particular person kind of like stick with me for kind of like at least an year, so that my work might be kind of like something. Wait a minute. My work would be kind of like a something little less. Okay, yeah, because I really need that kind of like a somebody person who could kind of like do something like that. So this is what I do. Okay, yeah. Like basically this thing, if I'm gonna hiring that particular person, I'm gonna make sure that will I able to kind of like simply sustain that particular person for at least an year. This is kind of like the question do I ask. Okay, another thing is that regarding about the equipment. Okay, like obviously if I kind of like running a business, I can't run by business by just me and hiring that particular person. No, I need a kind of like a something that I need equipment and things like that. Okay, yeah. So if I need equipment, what would I supposed to do? Okay, let's just say server or things or that or data center. I would probably kind of like somebody not really focus on growth of the application. No, because I understand that my application will not gonna kind of like assembly blown like as soon as I launch and things like that. Nothing really at all. Okay, so I kind of like consider that like at the beginning of the 5 year is a kind of like assembly survival mode. Okay, means like that I have to be kind of like assembly make sure that my expensive is kind of like something not spending the way that it should supposed to be spent. It kind of like spend little less, so that like basically it's this thing na ki it's a kind of like a very survival mode na? So I have to be save money on every possible scenario that I could do. Okay, yeah, with the hiring people, with kind of like a things, with kind of like some equipment and stuff like that. I'm not saying that I will not gonna spend money on equipment. Definitely I'm gonna spend the money on equipment, but like basically this thing I have to be make sure that equipment is kind of like somebody giving me the value that I really need it right now. Because let me understand, like let me clarify, like there is a kind of like a somebody server which is kind of like a cost almost like a $2,000 per year. Okay, yeah. And basically there is a kind of like a somebody rental server, rental database center, which cost almost almost like a basically is this thing that ki 500 or $500 per year. Okay, so what do you do, kind of like a $5,000 per year, or kind of like a something that ki like a $5,000, or kind of like a something $500 per year. So I would choose that $500 per year, because of that ki I at the moment I can't afford $5,000 for the equipment, because I don't really have that much amount of money na. Okay, even if I have, I don't want to spend. I know that ki having own server is a kind of like somewhat really essential for every possible scenario, but right now I can't afford that na. So I only afford the rented server. So I would probably rent such a server which kind of like cost me little less amount of money, so that I would kind of like somebody survive even more further. Okay, yeah. I'm not saying that I'm not gonna buy that server. I will gonna buy the server which is kind of like somebody independent, complete control of myself. But I need to afford that thing now. Like when I could afford that particular things, I would gonna buy those kind of like equipment and things like that. Okay, so I'm gonna make sure that my financial is in control regarding about the salary, regarding about the equipment, regarding about every possible scenario. Okay, yeah. Also, I'm kind of like a thinking that ki I would not really focus on growth that much. Okay, yeah. My main goal is that at the beginning when I launch my application, I'm gonna make sure that at least like a 10 year I should supposed to be maintain myself. I should supposed to be maintain myself. I should supposed to be, I don't want to get failure. Okay, yeah. If I'm kind of like going to try to focus on only on growth and things like that, then my trajectory would be kind of like for the growth you have to be kind of like somebody really need a stronger team and things, and that I can't really afford. So first of all is that I'm gonna make sure that whatever I do, I make sure my process, my application work really good and every possible scenario. One thing. Another thing is that um, this is kind of like a somebody 5 year of my application. Like if I launch my application, then 5 years should supposed to be kind of like my motto is that not kind of like a somebody became failure or things like that. Okay, not to kind of like somebody, yeah, not to get fail. Okay, so being kind of like somebody, my game plans to survival mode, so that I would survive for at least like a 5 year. Okay, yeah. In this particular period of time, I might not gonna earn any kind of like I might not gonna earn any kind of like somebody money, but I would seek the investor. I would kind of like find any kind of like an investor who could kind of like somebody invest some sort of amount of money in my application, so that basically is this thing I would kind of like control my expenses, and I would kind of like spend little bit money on stuff that I do I need. Okay, yeah. So this is what I do. This is what kind of like some stuff I do. It's not that like you shouldn't supposed to turn on your survival mode when the things went crazy or things went wrong. No, sometimes if you are kind of like somebody a very person that you understand what is actually your potential, and what like basically just understand what is actually happened, and you take the action regarding about the possible scenario will gonna happen, you will gonna kind of like decide very much wisely regarding about every possible scenario. Okay, yeah. Also, let me tell you one thing, survival mode is not kind of like a thinking that a failure, it's not kind of like a some symptoms of failure. Never never really at all. Because it's kind of like a something giving you opportunity to grow. Like do not consider as a failure, consider as opportunity to grow, and that is really good thing, dude. Okay, like sometimes optimism is somewhat really essential, and sometimes kind of like some things happen with you might not right, sometimes it's kind of like something wrong, but it kind of like a testing you that are you credible enough to kind of like somebody achieve the goal that you want to achieve or things like that. So this is what something really essential. Don't really think about kind of like a somebody failure or things like that. Consider as an opportunity to grow, and kind of like a somebody just do it. Just kind of like a somebody let it pass through this hard time. And this is what kind of like a somebody things what happened. Okay. So this is what I feel regarding about when I have kind of like I'm short in my money. Okay, if I'm kind of like I have little less amount of money, and this is what I think, this is what I kind of like simply do and stuff like that. Also, let me tell you one thing. Okay, the stuff that I mentioned over here is not exactly right, or is not exactly true, or is not exactly kind of like a somewhat something right, because in the future there is so many scenario and stuff like that. Okay, in future there is so much thing that I spend on short on money that I might not gonna need it. It's not really kind of like a something, this artifact is not reflect the kind of like a something exactly me or exactly what I do. No, it's kind of like a somebody is just my opinion, and obviously opinion would change according to the time, according to the kind of like a somebody scenario and stuff like that. Okay, so is this thing that in the future, I didn't really see in the future, I don't know what will gonna happen, I kind of like a predict that this would gonna happen, and I would supposed to be prepared for that. And this is what kind of like a something really good. Okay, because you are kind of like a something shifting your mindset according to the situation what is actually happened right now, or things like that, because it is somewhat something really help you to kind of like a grow on stuff. So the stuff that I mentioned in here is not exactly right, is not exactly true, is not exactly kind of like a something that this is exactly what I do. No, it's a kind of like a something my opinion. And also regarding about time, my opinion would be changed too. Okay, yeah, because sometimes a decision might be kind of like a something very different or things like that, but sometimes you do the stuff that is actually matter at that moment. All right, yeah. I also is this thing that key regarding about every person is kind of like somebody very subjective regarding about thoughts and things like that, and obviously it kind of like somebody help them to kind of like somebody be much better or stuff. I don't know, whatever it is. Okay, so this is it. I should supposed to be end here, and thank you.